Alright guys, so it looks like we're rapidly approaching the timeline where the face of the franchise, Marth, is top tier. Just like Melee, all over again. I'm okay with this.
Let the lesson begin.
What's up guys, Akariss here, bringing you another Fire Emblem Heroes video. Today's video is going to be a big one, because it's another weapon refine video with 8 characters getting weapon refines, and some of these are definitely worth talking about in great detail. Now, since there's 8 of them here, and I'm showcasing quite a few builds, there's obviously some things that will not get covered. For example, a lot of these characters I didn't really showcase for AR defense, minus Tana, which is a pretty obvious one. But the other ones are not so notable, so it's mostly focused on the AR offense or arena portion, depending on what character we talk about here. And of course, if you want to add anything, feel free to just drop your comments and how you use some of these characters. When it comes to fodder, I'm not pushing stuff like distance stance yet, or florets or anything like that, like super hyper invested sort of things. If it's a premium unit, I just assume maybe you have 1 to 3 merges or something. Most people will have something like that. Go plus 10, well, it's just a better case of that. So make sure you use what fodder you have and don't try to go overboard here, and try to understand how exactly you can best use some of these characters. It goes without saying that some of these are better than others when it comes to the quality of the refines, and there's definitely a lot more that can be shown or seen. For example, I'm actually going to be using Tiki for the month of Earth, this month, in AR and in Arena, so my opinion will definitely get more, it'll get more full as we go through this month, and I can get a better picture on how she can be used. But it's pretty obvious how some of these stand, so yeah. Anyways, guys, it took me a good amount of effort, a lot of time to put this video together, and all the sources and analysis that I do, so the least you can do for me is smash the like button, okay? So if you haven't already, it helps a lot, really. So I'm going to try to help you guys, as always, figure out exactly what all these new refines mean, because honestly, some of them are pretty exciting. That being said, let's start off with Legendary Marth. Oh boy, this is a big one. So, if you don't understand what that giant wall of text under me means, basically he has 8 to all stats just for free, as long as he's within 2 spaces of allies. I guess he initiates combat, and as long as he's over 50% HP or has a bonus effect, like some sort of buff, it's pretty easy to just get 8 to all stats for free. Now, since Marth is pretty much a year 2 unit, he has access to 20 flowers as well, so that's pretty nice. His weapon gives him an additional 3 speed. His weapon is Dragon Effectiveness. It has bonus doubler on it, and if that weren't enough, he has basically Chaos Ragnall in his weapon, which is if you try to debuff him, then he's going to get even stronger. Finally, his new special is Shining Emblem. I did cover that in the update notif video a couple of days ago, so you can go watch that if you want to, but essentially it's the same as Brave Marth, who gives him 6 to all stats at the beginning of the turn, and it has a 2 charge, which also does 35% of his speed, and then buffs his friends. It's pretty good. The whole kit is super synergistic, and finally, as if it wasn't enough, Binding Shield 2 makes it, and it's usable in enemy phase, a sort of speed check where as long as he's faster than his opponents, he gets an auto double, and he denies a double from the opponent, so it's like a Worry Fighter auto double effect. If he uses it on the player phase, it also has a wind sweep effect. Jeez, that is so overloaded. Even trying to explain that is how stacked Marth has become. Yes, this refine is good. Yes, Marth is good. Yes, you should use him in AR offense. He's better than Brave Marth. Yep, it's that good. However, he does have all the weaknesses that all your legendaries have, which is, of course, he is essentially fire locked. I'm going to start this off with the arena build here. So if you do happen to invest into Marth heavily, then he's going to be a pretty solid arena unit with R Duel Infantry 4. Thanks to his Binding Shield 2, he scores equally to a 180 base stat total unit, which is pretty nice for an old school legendary. You can merge him up with remixes. It might even be worth considering that, considering how powerful he is as a AR offense unit at the very least. He has some credibility on AR defense as well, which I didn't even cover here, but he's pretty solid, guys. So if you like Marth, well, if you're a Marth enjoyer, this is definitely the best. I would probably say the best version of Marth right now in the game. It's kind of crazy to have such a powerful remix, but he is the face of the franchise. So honestly, I'm not going to complain. Pretty good. Let's talk more about the people who don't have plus 10 Marths, and that is going to be showcased here with the builds. So with Marth here, we have 3 different ways that I would suggest using him, which is one with Mystic Boost, one with Steady Breath, and finally max invested version. So with the Mystic Boost and Steady Breath variants, essentially it just kind of depends on what your partners you want to match them up with. For example, if you run the Mystic Boost variant, it's a good idea to pair him up with his great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter, Lancina, just for that special acceleration. If you run the Steady Breath build, then it might be a good idea to run something like Flame with him. So just mostly what partner you pair him up with. He's going to want someone within 2 spaces anyways. You can also offer something like a Speed IV, since his Binding Shield 2 is technically a speed check. However, considering all of the speed, like just buffs he's getting in general from his weapon, and Shining Emblem, and all the shenanigans, he's going to end up not probably needing the Speed IV. He could also offer Res IV, because something like an AoE will shred him pretty hard, such as Legendary Lilina, or just AoE specials on defense in general. However, he's pretty solid, and I would say his like few weaknesses here are basically that he's weak to AoE, that he needs to be like within 2 spaces of allies, so it's kind of harder to throw him in there and make him work. And finally, he is kind of weak-ish to Panic. Weak-ish, because he still wants the buffs from his effects to get the bonus doubler plus the Unity. So Panic does hurt him a little bit, not too much, but a little bit. Anyways, I don't really think I have to go into too much detail as to why Legendary Marth is pretty good. So the weapon speaks for itself, the text, the details, the amount of stats he gets, and in general, he's a pretty solid unit, and in my opinion, a solid candidate for merging up for Arena and AR as a carry. He's very powerful. I'm not going to go too much into this because we have a lot more characters to look at here. So next up is Tiki, and this one is more personal to me because Tiki has been around on my account for a couple of years now, and she's been total trash. Just complete honesty, she's been total trash. Worst Earth Legendary without a doubt. However, she is in a more saving grace situation now. So again, with everyone too, I covered that in the update notif, but essentially, if you don't remember what that was, that is the far save for all stats. So it's like a spectrum far save, but on top of that, it gives defense res 6 within 2 spaces as a like start of turn buff, which is pretty awesome. So what that means is she's gonna have self synergy with this weapon refine. So the refine itself, like the base effect hasn't been changed. It's a dragon effectiveness weapon, 3 HP. Now, and the weapon refine may look a bit underwhelming at first glance. However, I'll explain why it isn't so bad in a moment. So it is self-synergistic. Basically, it's going to take that with everyone self-turn buff, take 75% of that, and apply it as a debuff penalty to attack on foes. Tiki herself has aged decently when it comes to stats. She's always been a high stat total unit because she's been like the first ever 180 stat total unit, which means she also has access to a lot of flowers, and giving herself that sort of buff and self synergy with far save is pretty nice right now, considering she just gets a bunch of stats. So the refine, 4 to all stats, with everyone too, 4 to all stats, and I debuff foes by 9 attack, usually. Now that can be overcome if foes use like lull skills, but generally speaking, it's pretty good. So if you have Tiki as an arena unit, and this is what I'm going to be doing, essentially just stack enough speed to beat Legendary Claude. That is the most oppressive Earth Legendary, and this build can do it. If you use Tiki with speed stacking, So using Divine Mist with everyone 2, Speed Res form, Kestrel Stance 3 in my opinion is the best one to apply Guard. She reaches about 68 speed in this build here. That's before even considering a speed buff or chill speed applied to Legendary Claude. Yes, she doubles and beats Claude. So that's pretty awesome. The only exception is of course the impact Claudes. Please don't be that guy. That's a pain. But generally speaking, this is now Tiki in her full potential. She won't take that much damage thanks to With Everyone and just a bunch of stats in her defense and res. This is finally a very usable version of Tiki. However, she's still likely going to lose to Legendary Julia. I don't think there's a way around that. Julia is going to probably kick her butt. But generally speaking, it's nice. It's an upgrade. Let's talk about AR offense and where I see her being used there. So, moving on, we have these variants here that I would consider and have actually started using and run into a few maps and builds and such. Now, the meta is actually fairly friendly to dragons right now, which is completely ironic from like a couple of years ago where I was like, dragon armor, oh my god, don't even do it. Nowadays, it's okay. You can actually win a matchup against like Thrasier, who has a green dragon effectiveness weapon, because there's just so much stats and debuffs and such that can help you win those matchups. I've combined Tiki here with Ashnerd personally, and Ashnerd runs Gorgorant, attack, defense, rain, and he has a -9 attack. Now combined with Divine Mist here, also -9 attack, you can effectively debuff foes by -18 attack, combining Tiki's Divine Mist and Ashnerd. A couple other characters can do this as well, such as Hanoka, Warrior Princess, George, and I feel like there's a couple others, like Tharja, for example, like Bridal Tharja. There's a couple solid candidates there, but I like Ashnerd because he's a melee unit, so he can essentially act as the near save, so to speak, while Tiki acts as the far save. With some good positioning, this ends up being a solid combo. So I form with Ashnerd, and this is how I'm using them for the time being. It feels very satisfying, actually. Now, in terms of builds, the ones that I think would work out best here are, depending on your merge and investment, Steady Breath combined with Moonbow or Noontime are both good considerations. Kestrel Stance 3, in my opinion, is the best definitive A slot. Now, the reason for this, and it can be, you can alternate it into other things like Steady Posture 3 or maybe Swift Stance 3 or whatever. Just essentially, here's what you have to do. You want to make sure she has a guard effect in the A slot. Slick Fighter is solid in the B slot to remove penalties, and Far Save in the C. You just want to combine the auto double effect from Slick Fighter. You want to combine a guard effect and some sort of special acceleration and Steady Breath. All of that combined is a solid combination for using her. However, from my experience, because I have a +10 Tiki, she may not even need the special from Moonbow or Noontime to secure kills. And this is because, as a far save unit, she is going to likely hit defense or res from adaptive damage, and that is really good combined with her decent attack stat and all this attack stacking in general, that she's gonna just get kills without even needing a special. So you can mix and match there and just honestly like not even rely on a special, just stack more stats with speed res form, for example. Or if we get attack speed form, that could be pretty good. Other allies such as Flane act pretty well. Hanoka, Warrior Princess could also be pretty solid. Even standard allies like Korin probably do pretty well, or even Marth for his falchion. So honestly, Tiki is in a pretty solid spot. Wind sweep is all over the place, doesn't bother Tiki. Effective damage, which was once a big oppressor to using something like Tiki, matters a lot less. I do feel like stacking her attack and speed is the way to go. Combine her with something like Flane if you feel like she's getting hit pretty hard. If not, just debuff your opponents like crazy with something like Ashnerd, and they will do minimal damage. Can't believe I'm saying this, but it is 2021, and Tiki is a solid arena and AR unit that you can actually use. I can't believe it, but here we are. As far as her ranking goes, I will reanalyze rankings for legendaries in general, because now even F Grima did end up getting C dual flying for, potentially, which is pretty nice. So yeah, we will revisit that, and obviously someone like Marth is in a bigger, better place. So let's move on. So obviously more guys to talk about here, with Helbindi being the next one. Now Helbindi's Refine is a lot of text, but honestly it's not that impressive. And the reason for this is, first of all, it has some weird odd number turn effect where you can buff all like himself and allies for 5 to all stats. This isn't really that important when you consider that Faye pretty much does the same thing. So if you're looking for some sort of buffer, just use Faye, really. The other thing here is he has another condition, which is just debuffing the foe by attack, like just lowering their attack and gaining his own attack, and then he has a worry fighter effect off of his refine. It's actually a fairly underwhelming weapon and a refine. All it really does is some small supportive capabilities, gives himself more bulk and more attack, and that's it. That's really all it is. So honestly, for Helbindi, it's not that impressive. And if you're going to use him, then you probably want to double down on the fact that he's just really bulky. So he dumps his speed stat and becomes really bulky in something like Arena. Cool, I guess. The supportive nature of it is pretty good for Arena. And if you give him like Times Pulse, then he has a 1-charge Ruptured Sky that could potentially kill some dragons and just take minimal damage. Not a very exciting unit, but I guess it is what it is. So there it is. Let's talk about Air Offense, where you could potentially use him as a carry. However, I am not totally convinced that he'll be so good there. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of competition with Green Axe Infantries. At least he's somewhat self-sufficient, but one little issue he has is all of the red meta. So we're talking like Legendary Lina, Legendary Sigurd, and of course Dual Lift. So kind of sucks, but the point here is you actually want speed on Helbindi to deny the follow-up properly against all those units. So his Worry Fighter type effect, where he's denying the auto doubles from all these characters, stuff like Dual Lift and Legendary Sigurd, might have enough speed if you don't give Bindi enough speed to still auto double him anyways. So you don't want to dump his speed, you may actually want to opt for a speed boon so that he can properly deny those doubles. Kind of unfortunate, but it is his scenario, and there are a couple of variants that you could do with him, which is something like an NCD build, which is pretty good, I guess. A lull build just to make sure he becomes as bulky as possible, and finally trying to stack as much speed with null follow-up, where he's denying follow-ups on the enemy, but also making sure that he gets his own with speed. So I'm not totally impressed with this one. We did just go through Tiki and Marth, and you look at this, it's not that great, but if you're a Bindi fan, I guess there's something you can do here. I'm not going to talk too much more on it. He's just honestly not that impressive. Next up is Kaze. So Kaze is, well, just a straight up better refine than Niles. Feels bad, man. As a Niles fan, I see this and I'm like, wow, that sucks. But essentially, he is running Flashing Blade 4 in the weapon refine. He gets attack speed and res, but notably missing defense in both the base effect and the refine. And yeah, that's pretty much it on what he does. I mean, slaying weapon, and it is what it is. Kaze has always been pretty fast and having high res, and has always been low defense, which makes him into a very specific type of role. His attack stat is not the greatest, but his weapon refine implies he should be running some sort of builds that play into that. Now, if you're going to run Kaze in Arena, then a good way to do it is to just give him Ruptured Sky, use his true damage, bump up his attack and speed, null follow-up, run it like this. Alternatively, you could use Times Bolt with an instant charge Ruptured Sky, but I would just see it as some sort of magical baiter or true damage kind of Ruptured Sky Slayer. Not that impressive, and there's a lot of roles here that overlap. In fact, someone like Soth could just be better. So let's go talk about some of the builds that you could probably pull off with Kaze. Now, with Kaze, because of his Flashing Blade 4 effect, and that does add into AoE damage, it's a good idea, or at least something to consider, as a PvE build. AoE, something like that, or air offense. So he's going to get a lot of AoE damage. He doesn't need Flashing Blade Seal. He can play into guard or special fighter effects, and do a big chunk of damage with AoE. Ideally, you pair him up with something that is going to pre-charge that special, such as Valoria, Raphael, Infantry Pulse. All those combinations will do really well. and you're gonna hit pretty hard. But I'm not sure how I would consider this useful, because far save can be pretty annoying. Some of the tanks have high defense anyways, so he's gonna need a lot of help to make this work, but with Mythic Blessings, maybe he can pull it off. Two other variants that I could see him doing is one with a close counter tank, where he's essentially trying to just bump up his defense to a serviceable level. Close reversal helps with this. Attack defense solo definitely helps with this. And he's already getting a bunch of attack speed and res from his weapon and the refine effect, so that's okay. Another way you could do it is also with a near save tank near him. Someone obviously like Arden or BK or Brave Hector, whatever. Those guys running near save, and he's going to be able to just rely on his high attack speed and res. Most nukers tend to be res, so he'll get some value there. It's okay. I feel like he's an okay unit. He gets the buffs where he needs, but the lack of defense does notably make him weaker against physical nukes or physical damage kind of stuff. So it's okay. Literally just okay. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. Next up here is going to be Hector, so another legendary to cover. The most defining feature about Legendary Hector is his Osteopulse 2, to be honest. So this refine is going to step aside as we talk about Osteopulse a little bit before we talk about the weapon itself. Just a reminder as to what Osteopulse 2 does. It's pretty much a times pulse for himself and every single unit on the team, as long as you limit it to 2. So same conditions as tactic skills. On top of that, you also buff defense and res by 6 map wide, pretty much. That is really good because a lot of stuff like armors and cavs and flyers don't normally have access to any sort of pulse effects, infantry pulse, times pulse, nothing like that. So being able to do that is very unique to Hector and makes him a very solid support option. Now, if we talk about the weapon itself, it's pretty much just like keeping the same effects with the Warrior Fighter. He's going to get attack and defense debuffs on foes, which is great, I guess. And finally, I'm going to call it the Fallen Edelgard Armored Wall Refine effect, where it's the first thing that hits him, reduces damage by 40%. That's not bad. It's actually not bad. Now, his stats are stacked in attack and defense with dumping speed and res. Unfortunately, you may actually want speed because, again, we have a lot of characters who have some sort of auto double effects. So when it comes to Hector, it depends how you want to use him, but I feel like in Arena, his best place is making sure you keep Pulse, Osteopulse 2. Using Thunder Armads is a sort of way to keep him bulky or alive, Armor March for mobility, and finally giving him dual phase effectiveness. So on the enemy phase, he may not have an auto double, but he's pretty resilient. With Bold Fighter, he can effectively Gale Force with a 4-charge Gale Force, which is pretty awesome. You don't have to use Slaying or any other weapon. Because of Osteopulse, he's going to be able to Gale Force fairly consistently. Not a terrible legendary by any means. He unfortunately does score fairly low combined with Legendary Roy. He's a bit outdated in that department, but he is having great utility. So when it comes to builds, I have a couple ideas here that could work. First of all, he does have access to the save skills, both near and far save. However, Osteopulse is so powerful that I honestly would recommend just keeping it all the time, but he can use them if you wanted to. The other ironic part here is Thunder Armads is probably not the best way to use them in the ways that you should use them for air offense. So if you do use him in air offense, he is going to want to run some sort of Wings of Mercy with some multiple type of mobility teammates running Gale Force. He is built for some sort of Gale Force shenanigans. So what I mean here is you either run the Ninja Masakari, giving him extra speed, and potentially being able to quad some of the slower units, such as Duo Sigurd. There's plenty of other ones too, but just giving those as an example. Or you run him with a Slaying Axe, Heavy Blade 4, and try to go for a one-shot if the Quick Impulse Seal is available. So 2-charge with Slaying Axe, or 4-charge with Ninja Masakari into some sort of quad or double kind of thing with Hector. Either way, those are solid ways for him to follow up and contribute to Gale Force. It's a bit wonky, definitely wants more investment, but best way that you could potentially use him. If you want him to see combat in action, consider save skills in the sea, but I do like Pulse 2. He's going to want something like Slick Fighter to neutralize penalties, and then run Ruptured Sky with Misted Boost and maybe it'll work. Honestly, not too convinced as some sort of tank. Hector gonna find a better place in arena more than AR offense. The 40% damage reduction is just nice, but I don't feel like he is some outstanding green armor by any means. Osteopulse 2 is what defines Legendary Hector and is what you should try to formulate your team comps around. Moving on though, we are going to take a look at Kliff. So with Kliff was like known as one of the first few guys who were like, if you have less attack than me, I get stats. I get stronger. So he does double down on that with his weapon base effect being upgraded, which is as long as you have more attack than me, I get 5 tall stats. This is fairly easy to accomplish considering his base attack is 30, but what is really cool is he has a sort of Ruptured Sky in his base effect, like literally Ruptured Sky. It's 15% instead of 20%, so he has true damage, which is based on the foe's attack stat, and that's really good, like really good. So Ruptured Sky, as you can tell, is almost recommended on most builds because it's really powerful to charge solid consistent damage among the whole enemy cast. As they get more attack, that does more damage, so it scales even better. Moonbow's also pretty good. But anyways, the actual weapon refine here gives him a guard effect and a pretty solid 4 to all stats. Nothing fancy, but it is pretty good with how you might want to use him. So in arena, if you do end up bringing him to a +10 investment, Times Pulse, Ruptured Sky, Null Follow-Up, pretty standard stuff, just kill things. He's bulky, he can likely bait things. He's got guard, which is actually pretty nice considering a lot of stuff does run Ruptured Sky on the enemy teams. I've seen many Bylets, dual Bylets, or Linjas running that sort of stuff, and Kliff can actually handle those particular matchups due to the amount of stats he ends up having. A defense IV could be a solid alternative, so he is an interesting blue mage in this regard. However, when it comes to AR offense, it's much different in how you would approach using Kliff. Unfortunately, there is already like a lot of competition in using blue mages. We have like Micaiah, Guinevere, and even Bronya. So, and when it comes to like tankiness. So unfortunately, Kliff isn't super awesome when it comes to using him in air offense, but there were a couple ways that I could see it happen, which is you use him as a close counter tank and try to use his bulk to some effect, or you combine him with a near save and then use his attack and speed. Remember that this whole like attack check thing happens based on visible stats. So you can use stuff like attack speed solo or M. Corrin buffs or anything like that to buff his in combat attack, and it's not going to make him miss those checks. On top of that, he has a guard effect, which is really powerful for air offense. So you're not dying to some sort of auto doubles or anything like that. That has some accelerated specials. So he's okay, but there are other blue mages that fill a similar role. So he's yeah. When it comes to a very unique take on this though, consider that the weapon itself does mention that the true damage gets applied on AoE specials as well. So that is an interesting way to consider using him, because there aren't many AoE specialists that are mages that I would feel have this sort of effect here. So you can take an enemy's attack stat and apply it to himself for some extra damage. The AoE itself won't scale really well, but he can do some sort of AoE shenanigans as well. Again, mostly an okay build, nothing super crazy or outly like impressive, but it can work. So next up is Linus. Now Linus, I don't even know why he got an extra refine, but here we are, and it's slaying again. He gets extra attack and speed, I guess. Instead of like life and death, he just straight up gets the attack and speed without any sort of defense or res penalty. So the base effect is already it's already an upgrade to the old Basilicos, which is kind of sad for Raven users, but I guess that guy has Resplendent, so it makes up for it. The weapon refine itself is a fairly easy condition to meet, which is just 75% foe HP, cool. And then debuff speed and defense further, giving him a more offensive presence. Unfortunately, the actual refine effect isn't all too impressive in my opinion, which is taking enemies' bonuses and then reversing them into a stat advantage or penalty, or rather. So that's not that great. If anything, that would probably be pretty good for something like AR defense, but an infantry right now, a melee infantry on air defense, isn't all too impressive. So you're not going to get too much value out of that. If there's anywhere that you might, it's probably going to be in Arena. So if you end up using him in Arena, then a Ruptured Sky or Gale Force build might be the way to go, and he'll definitely get a lot of value out of that weapon. However, for air offense, things are a bit different here, where you're probably going to be running some sort of either Gale Force setup with Wings of Mercy, where again, you're not likely to run into foes who have any sort of like bonuses or buffs where you're gonna really take advantage of it. His Refine may effectively just be speed defense -5, which is whatever. But in terms of tanking, you may run into rallies or some sort of buffs that involve odd recovery where he could potentially get some value. Now, when it comes to support or builds, it's the same idea here. You can run Ruptured Sky with his slaying weapon and then combine him with something like Male Corin if you run Spurn for more stats, or with Flame if you run no follow-up. Depending on the partner, these are the solid builds to consider. He's okay. Again, nothing fancy. None of these are... I mean, Legendary Marth basically came in and stole the show for the rest. Good refines are good. There's nothing to complain about when a unit just does their job better, and a lot of these refines kind of do that. So if you already were a fan of stuff like Linus or Helbindi or Kliff or whatever, you can just be happy that they do their jobs better, extra effects, an upgrade nonetheless. So next up on our list is going to be, or finally, the last one is Summer Tana. Now this one is extremely interesting actually, because it is very unique and possibly meta defining for the people that may have Summer Tana. I don't feel like she will be common enough for it to matter, but there is definitely some relevance here. So, effectively, she has some sort of super guidance effect. So, if you've been using the other Tanas or a couple other characters who can just like jump 2 spaces ahead, I think it's pretty much just Tana here, or maybe it was Halloween Noe as well, or rather she jumps ahead. So, these type of characters have like these super guidance effects, which end up being crazy setups in one way or another. She has attack and speed given to herself, both off of the weapon refine and her base effect, and she also buffs joint drive, attack, and speed within 2 spaces. That's pretty much what that is, her weapon refine. It's okay, it's not bad. If you think about different ways to use her, I honestly think she might be the best candidate for R Duel Flying 4 right now because of that insane amount of mobility. Combine aerobatics, trace, maybe even flyer formation depending on your team comp, because that guidance effect isn't restrictive to just infantry and armors. It can be used by other flyers and calves even, so it's pretty nice in that effect. It can make a character move effectively 4 spaces ahead, which if you've been seeing Legendary Sigurd's effect is pretty solid. If you happen to have a +10 Summer Tana, it is a good time to potentially use her in Arena with R Duel Flying. Finally, some builds here. So in offense with super guidance, it's going to be a good idea. But if you're going to use her this way, probably should be with some sort of like far save, near save combination, and just being able to position perfectly. Tana is the definition of a unit here that is going to let you position exactly how you want in perfect formations. That is where I think she shines. You could end up using rain skills, joint drives, distant guards, close guards. It just completely depends on what's happening, or even flyer formation for her to get in a good position. Again, depends on your own team comps, but that's how you would effectively use her on air offense as a support unit, which she does a decent job at. Now, a different way, if you do have some merges or you really like Tana, you could consider using her with a near save support as a tank. The reason you would do this is because she does enable some nice shenanigans, definitely nice follow-ups, and hopefully just a smoother game in general because of that mobility that she offers. Finally, and where I feel she has the most potential, is going to be air defense combined with rally setups. So if you combine aerobatics or flyer formation, or even just give her some sort of air orders, she's going to be able to potentially rally forward on some characters, and then set up all these different type of cases where nukers come in from 2-4 spaces away and just crazy setups. Now, the only issue with being able to do that is I feel like you're going to want to combine her with anti-isolation effects, because if she gets isolated, then this whole situation falls apart. So Sarah is going to be a great partner on air defense, and likely the combination of either odd and even recovery, maybe with Catapult and Duma. That is how I could see it, but defense is likely her meta-defining spot, with AR offense as some sort of like guidance support being a good alternative. Alright guys, so that was a big one, but I guess it's well deserved considering how much there was to talk about here. So I definitely missed some details, and I welcome you to drop comments below how you think you're going to be using these characters, or alternative builds that even you want to share. Feel free to do so. Comments below. I hope you guys appreciate the amount of effort and time that I put into this. It does take quite a bit. So yeah, the least you can do to help me out is to smash the like button, sub if you haven't already, and Patreon description below. That's it for me, guys. I will likely be doing more Tiki gameplay, so if you want to check that out, then Twitch is the way to go. Again, in the description below. See you guys in the next one. Much love. Peace.
It's over.